When thinking of the iconic engines of America in vehicles, what comes to your mind? To my mind, first is the Flat 8 Ford. The Flat 8 Ford, introduced in 1932, almost revolutionized the American motor industry. It was known by the crooks and the outlaws to outrun the police. It's just so much history behind the Flat 8. While so many car companies were on the Flat 4s, Flat 6s, the Flat 8 just seemed to be leaps and bounds ahead of them. And that was one engine that did that. The other one I had in mind is the one I'm going to talk about today. And that would be the 225 Slant 6. The 225 Slant 6 was introduced in 1960 to the American public. And when it was done being produced, may surprise you. Come hang out in the hood. I am not a guru on Slant 6s. Never have been and don't claim to be. Not sure I'm a guru on anything, to be truthful. But the Slant 6 is one of those engines in American history that throttled so many different types of vehicles. And I want to just mention a little bit about what else it done besides motor things down the highway. And it's a unique piece in its way. Designed in the late 50s, 58, 59, available to the public in 1960. They tilted it, the Slant 6, 30 degrees so it would fit under the hood of the early A-bodies and the type of cars they were putting it in, because it was too tall straight up. So kind of a unique in its own way. Most people know the common things maybe that I'm going to speak on, but the Slant 6 was built for production cars through 83 and in production pickups through 1987. But wait, it was in the industry vehicles and different types of maybe farm equipment to 1991. One of its areas outside of the highway where it actually ran was about 15 years on the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline. And I think that production went 15 years ending around 1991. Amazing. The oddity with the Slant 6 is not much really revolutionized over all of those years. Like from 1960 to 1983 in the automobile, it's really never revolutionized. A couple of small changes, but they were small. And the pickup truck, even in the 80 up to 87, there was plenty of room in some of these vehicles to stand the thing up straight, but never did. They left it alone as it was. And I want to talk just a little bit about that. Resorting back to my 1982 dealership brochure on this vehicle, I'm going to take us to this page where it talks about the factory engine options that was available. And one thing you'll notice is this. The net horsepower is 95, torque is 170. That's if you have the one barrel. If you got the two barrel upgrade known as the Super 6, you went from 95 to 100 horse and from 170 foot-pounds of torque to 175 foot-pounds of torque. So it was worth 5 and 5, the two barrel option. But I want to tell you, these are net horsepower from 72 on up. It was net. So roughly any Slant 6 you own had about the same horsepower from 60 to 87 in your production vehicles. Basically in net horsepower between 95 and 105, and in gross horsepower, that's 71 on back. Same engine, same power, it was just rated differently, giving it about 145 horsepower in those numbers. So really in today's numbers, or from 72 on up, you're talking about a roughly rule of thumb 100 horsepower motor. And uniquely, from start to finish, there really was no advancement in the performance of the engines, save 5 horsepower plus or minus. I kind of treat the Slant 6 like a tolerance, plus or minus 5, starting at 100, 105 to 95. This one here happens to be the Super 6, and that means it's got the 2-barrel on it. And this is an older style 2-barrel, so when it was started, it was actually considered a powerful, torquey 6-cylinder, especially in the early A bodies. But without really ever giving it an update, other 6-cylinders just passed it. One thing of note that it was noted for was reliability. And in this reliability, the Slant 6 had created a name and a reputation of just being consistent and reliable for miles and miles and years. So when at the dealership and turning the pages, picking colors, picking interior, picking club cab, quad, or the crew cab, dually, and looking at the Ram tough features in the engine department, the good old 360, good old 318, and the 225 3.7 remained an option. And one thing about the Slant 6 that really hurt it in power is the fact that we have the exhaust and the intake coming on the same side. And the exhaust and the intake on the same side is never a good thing when you're trying to create performance. Think of most of your V8s, think of most of your performance engine, intake in, exhaust out. And that's the flow. On this, it's intake in, exhaust out. Not a good idea for a head. And that's why if you really want to create some serious horsepower with the Slant 6, you're either using nitrous or turbo. It would eventually become to be replaced in the Dodge truck lineup, be it Dakota or D150. It would be replaced by the 3.9 V6, which is a cutoff 318. If you don't know what that means, a 318 missing 2 cylinders. I'll leave it to you guys to debate if that was a better engine or not, if it made more power than not. But the 6-cylinder was revolutionized briefly into its life. By 92, it became a Magnum. And certainly nobody can argue that the Magnum V6 didn't have more power. Actually, it had about 75 more horsepower than this one when you get into the Magnum. So eventually they revolutionized that, which they never did. They just keep producing the same thing. By the tune of over 15 million. And this is before we had 350 million known people in this country. With well over 15 million of them being produced, it wasn't a hard engine to come up with, and it still isn't really. Marketplace has them, cars sitting in the back field have them, but nonetheless, it doesn't take anything away from the work that this done in becoming an American iconic engine in propelling so many vehicles down the highway, and industrial equipment and Alaskan pipeline and everything else you can come up with that the Slant 6 was a part of and did its job well. Did it win many races? Well, maybe it beat a few 6-cylinders in the beginning. It certainly wasn't up to par at the end of its journey. Certainly a 300 Ford 6 would eat its breakfast and its lunch in a race against the D150, and it's how it went. It wasn't revolutionized, but it's still going strong. So if you think that power and passing power and racing up hills, pulling horse trailers was at the top of everybody's list, you'd be wrong. So many of these were produced with the Slant 6, and it sold so many, even in the last years when people were selecting a new vehicle. And it wasn't because it was known for its power and all of that, but rather for its reliability and the hundreds and millions and billions of miles that these Slant 6s all over this country and other countries experienced with the good old 225 Slant 6, 198 Slant 6, and even the 170 Slant 6, throttling American families, taxi cabs, industrial equipment, and pipelines all across this country. What other engine has been produced by the mass of millions as the 225 Slant 6? Like I said in the beginning, the Flat 8 was a revolutionary motor, and certainly the Slant 6 became an American icon. Not the 426 Hemi. That was just an icon in American muscle. This was an icon, the Slant 6 was, in American history. Amazing enough? Let me know your thoughts. I'm interested in how you feel about it.